Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 108 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. We're nearing the end of the month, so it's time for me to shout out my patrons. Justin Bailey, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Forrest Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, Matthew Saint, and Utuk Zuul. Thank you again for your contributions. Remember, it's just $1 per month to join in and get this monthly shoutout, as well as full scripts and audio outtakes. Now, on to the show. This week, we're continuing our series on lesser-known X-Men to put a spotlight on the members of the team that haven't shown up in the movies, cartoons, or other adaptations, or otherwise seem to have been forgotten by the general public. We're going in chronological order of people joining the team, and we've reached a retcon I've discussed briefly before. In episode 86, I talked about certain mutants being immune to the powers of their family members, and brought up Vulcan, brother to Cyclops and Havoc. To elaborate on that original discussion, in the 2005/2006 miniseries titled Deadly Genesis, we learn that Scott and Alex's mother, Catherine, had been pregnant when she and her husband, Christopher, were abducted by the Shi'ar. When Christopher tried to escape, the Emperor Deken killed Catherine as a punishment. However, the unborn child, unknown to Mr. Summers, was saved and placed in an incubation/accelerator, which aged the child up to his teenage years. He was made a slave and stationed with his master, Eric the Red, on Earth. Eventually, he was able to escape and found his way to X-Men ally Moira McTaggart, who took him in and helped him learn to use his budding powers. Sometime later, after the original X-Men team was defeated by Krakoa, Professor X recruited a team to rescue them. However, this retconned-in second team also failed, and they were killed rather than captured as the first team had been, necessitating the foundation of a third team, that one being the International Team of Mutants introduced in 1975's Giant Size X-Men #1, the book that renewed the X-Men concept and started Chris Claremont's epic run on the title. The second team included Cyclops' up to this point unknown brother Vulcan. However, when that team was apparently killed, Professor X decided to mind wipe Scott's memory of the incident and his now lost sibling. It turns out, however, that Vulcan actually survived, albeit comatose, when Krakoa was launched into space by Polaris. The details of how he survived will come later. He eventually reawakened and returned to Earth, where he revealed Professor X's mind wipe. Since then, Vulcan has been used mostly as a cosmic-level threat, as he attempted to take over the Shi'ar Empire after Emperor Deken fell into a coma, which resulted in a civil war among the spacefaring race, split between those loyal to Vulcan and those who backed Lilandra, a native Shi'ar princess who has had romantic ties to Professor X on and off over the years. Vulcan is eventually the victor and is declared emperor for a time, using his power, both military might and his mutant energy manipulation abilities, to conquer nearby planets, expanding the Shi'ar's already significant influence in the galaxy. However, his reach exceeded his grasp when he tried to attack the Kree Empire, which at the time was being led by the inhuman king Black Bolt. In the final battle of that war, both Vulcan and Black Bolt seemed to be killed, although both have since returned. We learned the secret of Vulcan's return recently in 2020's X-Men number 10, which tied into the Empire crossover. Apparently, he was pulled out of the spatial rift he was trapped in by a trio of mysterious godlike beings who want to take advantage of his, quote, heart of burning fire, end quote, to release chaos onto the world. Vulcan currently lives on the moon, along with two of his teammates from the Deadly Genesis squad, Petra and Sway. Both of these women were shown to die in that storyline, but thanks to the combination of multiple mutants working together, resurrection is not only possible, but is basically a given for any mutant. A fact that has been kept secret from the rest of the world, although that may change soon. We haven't seen too much of these two outside the original miniseries where they were introduced, but here's what we do know. Petra, last name still unknown, is a second-generation immigrant from Denmark, as her mother was pregnant when they moved to the US. Petra's powers first activated when she was 13, when a rock slide killed her entire family but left her unharmed. To this day, she questions if she inadvertently caused the rock slide in the first place, or if her inexperience simply caused her to only be able to protect herself and not her family. She was put in foster care, but when her foster father tried to molest her, her powers activated once again, with the ground suddenly swallowing him up. This obvious display of her powers caused her to be labeled as a mutant, and Petra ran away, hiding in caves that she altered with her powers. She survived on the streets for years, using her geomorphic abilities to change coal into diamonds, and selling those for money. Although she kept the diamonds small, after the first one, to allay suspicion, she eventually caught the attention of the police, who took her in. Fortunately, or unfortunately considering how it ended up, Moira McTaggart took her in and started training her in the use of her mutant powers until Professor X recruited her and the others in Moira's custody to rescue the original X-Men team from Krakoa. The mutant known as Sway had a similarly tragic backstory to Petra, as her parents were killed in the crossfire between two rival gangs. Suzanne Chen, as the young girl was still known at the time, came out of the shooting unscathed, as she activated her newfound ability to manipulate time and was able to get out of the way of the bullets. As with Petra, her powers were not able to save her parents, but upon returning to the scene, she found she could also use her abilities to replay events, and thus was able to follow the time echo of the killer's car back to their apartment and informed the police of their location. When a firefight broke out between the cops and the gang, this time she was able to extend her manipulation of time enough to save the police, although this outed her as a mutant. One of the detectives who she saved contacted Moira, leading to Suzanne moving to Moira's facility to train in the use of her abilities. The final member of this team is the only one of the four that has been portrayed on the big screen, but is still one I would consider lesser known, since his time in the film is sadly cut short. In the reboot/prequel film, X-Men First Class, one of the young mutants we are introduced to is taxi driver Armando Munoz, whose power to automatically alter his body to deal with any physical threat should make him nearly unbeatable. However, in an unfortunate, hopefully unconscious, display of the black guy dies first trope, he's dispatched in the team's first confrontation with Sebastian Shaw. Despite being able to adapt to anything from drowning to physical beatings, Darwin simply explodes after being forced to swallow one of Shaw's blasts. In the comics, the character shows much more resilience. Growing up mostly as a lab experiment, he's brought to Professor X and Moira's attention at a fairly young age, and trains at Moira's facility with Petra, Vulcan, and Sway. When the team goes to Krakoa at Professor X's behest and are killed, Darwin and Vulcan actually survived with the help of their teammates. Sway slowed down time around them, giving Petra enough time to try to bury them safely away. Although Petra and Sway died in this attack, Darwin's body evolved to become pure energy and absorbed the life forces of his dead companions, and then merged with the last of them, Vulcan, who was buried away. When this Gestalt being finally awoke years later, he had the powers of all four. Near the end of the Deadly Genesis miniseries, Darwin was successfully separated from Vulcan and regrew a body from scratch. Since then, he has been a fairly regular cast member in the X-books, first in Uncanny X-Men, then joining X-Factor during the time period when that team was an investigative firm run by Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. His last big adventure took him, Wolverine, not Logan, but Laura Kinney, who used to be known as X-23 and now shares the Wolverine codename with Logan, and Synch into a base run by the Children of the Vault. Those three were specifically chosen due to their ability to live for hundreds of years, as time flows differently inside the base. All three were killed during this mission, but it was successful as Synch telepathically relayed their findings to the outside world, and all three were later resurrected. That seems like a good stopping point for this episode, since these members all joined together, and the next one on the list comes from the next iteration of the team. I hope you enjoyed this look at some X-Men team members you may not have heard of. If this inspired any other questions from you, please send them to me. Or just send me feedback on the show in general. I love hearing from my listeners. You can send any and all of those via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All of their sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.